for the conduct of our life. For a Jew, the highest value is fidelity to our covenant with God. Traditionally, that covenant includes 613 commandments. I'm surprised. I'm sure some of you are surprised, because for sure we can testify for the 10 commandments. We saw the movie. So definitely Charlton Heston brought the 10 commandments from the top of Mount Sinai, Hollywood style. Jewish values are embodied in those commandments. The Torah itself tries to reduce the list of 613 to something basic. So we get the 10 commandments. The prophet Micah reduced the list to 3 general commandments. This is quotation from the book. What does God require of us? Only to do justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with God. You remember this from the book of Micah. Some only. So here we're going to examine other lists of basic, which our forebears have derived from the Torah, and see if we can come up with our own list. So that's our job today, to come up with our list of the most important commandments that exist. In Palestine, during the 2nd century, Emperor Adrian forbade the Jews to observe the Torah. Study of Torah and observance of its commandments was punishable by death. The rabbis met in this moment of crisis and asked themselves, what are we going to do? We love life. We don't want to forfeit life. But are there any commandments which are so basic and so important that we should even be willing to die for them? They debated and debated. Yeah, when you have 3 Jews, you can have 5 arguments going at the same time. We love to debate each other. And we still try to stay friends after those debates. It's not easy always. They debated and finally concluded that to save our lives, we can violate all the commandments of the Torah except 3. The first is the commandment, thou shalt not murder. A rabbi explained the matter thus: if a Roman general comes up to you and says, you see that man over there? You kill him or I'm going to kill you. You must not obey that order, even at the risk of your own death, because, quotation, what makes you think your blood is redder than his, end of quotation. In other words, he has as much right to life as you. The second commandment, you shall not be willing to die for, rather than violate, is the prohibition of incest. Certain fundamental taboos are at the heart of preserving the integrity of family life. You must be prepared to die rather than violate them. And the third act you must not do at risk of forfeiting your life is the flagrant act of idolatry, that which so totally profanes all that you are intended to stand for as a Jew. So all commandments can be violated to save your life, except 3: the prohibition against murder, incest, and idolatry. So is this conversation clear? Is this debate make sense to you? How do you feel about those 3 commandments that you cannot violate? You can violate everything else except those 3 commandments.
seems to me that that in reading each one of them literally, they can also be taken. I don't know what the other word is, like metaphorically. Like, you can't murder a person, the physical part of the person, but you also should not be able to murder the emotional, spiritual, and intellectual of the person. That's how I take that one. The others.
Yeah, I think the rabbis at this point of the debate were actually just trying to address the physical murder. But you're right about the later generations' conversation around exactly those topics. But under Roman ruling, life was extremely hard. I don't think that everyone understands that period of ruling in Palestine. The Romans were extremely cruel. The orders that came from Rome were not comfortable. That's why sometimes I was astonished about the debate in early Christianity that the Jews actually are the one that crucified Jesus. It was their, they didn't have any authority to bring Jesus into a trial. It was the Romans who intended to destroy any kind of revolt in Palestine on those days. So they were very much responsible for the death of Jesus. But it's funny, I'm talking about this 4,000 years later, where so much blood was spilled on the premise that really the Jews did it. One day it's like an onion that you need to peel gently, carefully. And every time you move a layer, you discover other truth that we need to be open for. But the Roman regime was a terrible regime. Yes, please, Sharon, yeah.
Yeah, I just have a question, Rabbi, about the third one, the act of idolatry. What did the rabbis have in mind with that?
Replacing the belief in God with idols. I think they were not interested in defining idolatry by anything else except worshiping other gods. Which, by the way, the ancient Israelites, because of the mixed population that took place in Palestine, and Palestine as an important marketplace that people came from all over the world, people brought their gods. We definitely know what happened in the time of the life of King Solomon. So in order for King Solomon to enlarge his empire to the level that empire was large, the way he did it was very simple. He married daughters of the rulers around Palestine, and that's how he was able to create covenantal relationship with their fathers, kings that ruled in other places. Guess what those women brought into the palace in Jerusalem? Every woman brought her gods into the palace. So there is a lot of admonition, in addition to marveling the wisdom of King Solomon, from the rabbis about the relationship that the king had with all those women and the difficulty of combating idolatry during his time. So I think at this moment, it's a pure worshiping of other gods that were all had a physical image. Any other questions? Okay. Now I'm in the last two lines. Now we are getting closer to a fundamental Jewish value at the heart of our covenant. names of two rabbis, extremely important rabbis in Talmudic time, Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Ben Azai. They asked a question: what is the basic principles in the Torah through which we can understand the Jewish value system? So remember again what the debate is here. We have 613 commandments in the Torah, and the debate is here about, so tell me what's at the core. I know we have 613, but what makes Judaism different? So Rabbi Akiva said, I find it all in that verse in Leviticus 19, which is known as the Holiness Code. If you have a chance one day, open Leviticus 19 and read the chapter, because it has so many commandments there. And so in Leviticus 19, one can find the following verse: you shall love your neighbor as yourself. So that's the most important commandments, Rabbi Akiva says. Except that Rabbi Ben Azai said, I find it all in chapter 5 of the book of Genesis. And that chapter 5 has the following verse. And the verse is, these are the generation of men. In the day that God created many in the image of God was he created. So for this rabbi, the most important commandments is the one that tells us that we are all created in God's image. And of course, why is that? Why would that verse be more important for this rabbi from the verse, you shall love your neighbor as yourself? What's going on here?
Because when we violate another human being, we're violating God. And when we have an act of kindness towards another human being, it's an act of kindness towards God.
Yeah. It is the knowledge. What a gift that in chapter 5 of Genesis, we are told that we are all created in God's image. Can you imagine, by the way, if the scribes of the Torah omitted this and we didn't have this? What would happen to our world if we never had that verse? At least we have something to aspire to. I mean, of course, there will be a debate about what God wants from us, but still to be comfortable and clear that I and you and every one of us is created in God's image, that shuts the conversation about who is more important than who. Your blood is not blue. We all have red blood. We're all created in God's image. And by the way, this reminds me of the following midrashic story, a story from our tradition. The angels in heaven were very afraid of men being created. So they had an emergency meeting in some of the halls in heaven. And the question on the debate was, we need to kidnap God's image and hide it, so God can never create men in his image. If we hide the image, men will never be able to discover where it is, and it will be just us, angels, and God. Yeah, I'm sure there was a big party. So they came up with ideas. One angel suggested to bury God's image in the depth of the ocean. Another angel suggested to place it on the top of the highest mountain in the world. Men will never discover this. By the way, when I say men, I'm talking about women too, okay? But they discussed men. They were chauvinistic. those angels. And then suddenly there is always this other angel with maybe not full-blown wings yet. He was a young angel. And he said, I have the best idea. Let's hide God's image inside of men. Men will never be able to discover it. Think about this. Sometimes we need those big, how do you call those instruments that pave roads? The big, I can't hear.
Steamroller?
A what?
A steamroller?
Or a bulldozer.
Whatever, you guys know what I'm. Sometimes it takes layers and layers and layers of removing it until we become human. And so the role of our life is actually to discover the image of God in everyone else.
Rabbi,
Yes,
I have a question.
please.
So I know that the people that we're talking about were men, talking about other men. And I understand that.
They all had
I beg your pardon?
wives.
Whatever. So what, yeah, all right. But what my hang up is about all of this is when we were created or supposedly created in the image of God, who exactly are we talking about? Who is created in the image of God? Are plants created in the image of God?
No. We're not talking about animals. We're not talking about plants. They have their role and blessing from above. And the blessing comes through rain or other ways, sun. We are talking about human beings. The conversation is only about human beings because God is the one that infused the Spirit of God inside of us. If you remember the story, one of the stories of creation, there are so many stories. God, she or he, it doesn't matter, she slash. I love to think about God in a feminine images. It happened to me when I saw the movie All That Jazz, because if you remember well the movie, if not, go get it from one of the movie places. At the end, the director of the shows on Broadway dies, and who comes to kiss him but God with the last kiss, and God is a female actress. And so when I saw that, I was convinced that God is female. Anyway, sorry. That's what rabbis do sometimes. We just go to all kind of other places. So is this answering your question? So God is, although God is responsible for the creation of the world, when we talk about the nature of man and a woman created in God's image, he created both of them at the same time. So there are two different stories of Genesis, of creation. One story is that God created both men and a woman in the image of God. The second one is a lot more elaborating, of taking earth from four corners of the earth and creating men from the earth. That's why the name is Adam. Adam comes from the word in Hebrew, Adamah, which means earth. We're all created from earth, from the same earth. And God took the earth from four corners of the world, so no one claims that my earth is more rich than your earth.
So Rabbi, if we were created from earth and the plants grow from the earth and we're sustained from the earth, why are we not more equal in our standard, in our acceptance of holiness our acceptance.
I think creation is holy, but I still think that we have a whole different role to play in this world. And so the image of God, usually in Jewish tradition, is referring to the creation of humanity. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
That doesn't.
It's okay, but I still feel like in all text, we're not talking about women. I don't think in all text we talk about women. And
I totally agree. But I want to make sure that you know how many women were involved in those rabbis' lives. And those women, like my wife, may her memory be a blessing, had a lot of influence on me. So I think those women were sitting on the side maybe, but they listened to the debates and the conversations. And one day we'll discover some kind of a scroll that was written by one of them, and then we're going to really celebrate that. So can you wait a few hundred years for that to happen?
Since when? Since when are we willing to wait? I feel like today is a day of an example of why we shouldn't wait with Martin Luther King Day. I just feel like stop waiting. Stop waiting. Anyway.
I agree.
Okay. All right, sorry.
But I hope that all of the women here on the on this class feel that they are also created in God's image, and there's no discussion. We definitely appropriated. Knowing so many women online here, I have a big feeling that all of you definitely appropriated a long time ago that you too are created in God's image. I hope I'm right. Am I right?
So yes, I'm just struck by the movie My Big Fat Greek Wedding, when Lainey Kazan says, yes, the man is the head of the household, but the woman is the neck.
Absolutely.
Wonderful.
I want to be the head. I don't want to be the neck.
By the way, whoever stopped you, whoever had a courage to say to you, you're not the neck. You assumed that role from early childhood. Look at the work you have done. I don't think you have any room to apologize for anything. Okay. Is there another hand here that I didn't see? Anyone else would like to jump into the conversation? So I hope, I definitely accept the ruling of the second rabbi. For me, if you know that you are created in God's image, it also includes love your neighbor as yourself. I really like the second response. If you understand the image of God inside of you, you will also ask the question then, what am I supposed to do in this world, God? And then hopefully you will never get to the same level of God, although some people assume that they are divine. Do you need any examples? No, I'm not. But there is responsibility as a result of the knowledge that we are creating God's image. Let's continue. Actually, I'm in the second paragraph of the page. Actually, much of what we have been talking about so far, you shall not murder, what is hateful to you, do not do to another, love your neighbor as yourself, remember that all creatures are created in a divine image. All these are embraced in a basic principle contains in the Talmud. And I'm going to teach you now two Hebrew words, kvod habriot. Briot is creatures, God's creatures. Kvod habriot means respect for the dignity of all God's creatures. So there is a commandment in the Talmud, kvod habriot. One should observe and respect God's image. So the reason why I love my neighbor as thyself is because I know that my neighbor is also created in God's image. And who gives me the permission to denigrate the other if the other was created in the same image that I was created? I always love the second response of the rabbi than the first one. Because love your neighbor as yourself. What if you don't love yourself? What happens then? What happens to the relationship to the neighbor? So for me, the second response of the rabbi is something that I try to conduct my life with. Let's continue. Paragraph 3. What are the implications of this dignity principle, of the respect for the dignity of all God's creatures? Another rabbi, Rabbi Joshua, the son of Levi, it's very important in the Talmud to always tell who is your father or mother. So you know what, because a lot of people were named Levi. He was born in Lida some 1700 years ago. So Rabbi Joshua was a leader of his people in his generation. And he would sometimes represent the Jewish community before the Roman government. Once Rabbi Joshua traveled to Rome. He was thrilled by the magnificent splendor of the capital city, of the secular world, its glorious buildings, its impressive castles, and its beautiful statues, covered with costly tapestry to protect them from the winter cold and summer heat. He stood in awe before the splendor of Rome. Just then, a man tugged on his sleeve, and as he turned around, he beheld a beggar in rags, cold, hungry, emaciated. The beggar pleaded with him for a coin in order to buy a crust of bread. Joshua said, "Here are the buildings of stone, cold, lifeless, but protected and watched over. And here is a man created in the image of God, clothed in tattered rags." I thought of this rabbinic tale the other day when I sat with other clergies and we heard one of our colleagues speak of the experience of spending the night on Omaha streets. That Talmudic tale returns to haunt us. We who live in the most powerful, most prosperous nation on earth, in the shadow of our gleaming skyscrapers, under the overpasses, huddled in alleys, are the homeless we hear about. Yes, some are there because they are alcoholic, some because of mental instability, some are there because they live on the margin, and when things get tough, they fall first. And some are there because they did not have the luck to be born in a loving, nurturing household. Here's how I see the connection to the day celebrating, commemorating Martin Luther King. Those were things he always preached about, always talked about. Anyone has a question about the tale, the Talmudic tale about the rabbi who visited Rome? Do we also see this in our life, in our time?
Rabbi, what came to mind for me
Yes.
was the building when Notre Dame Cathedral caught on fire.
Yes.
People's response to that and the billions of dollars that were raised instantly versus all the other causes that affect humanity that go unfunded and uncared about.
Beautiful. That's a powerful image. We saw the fire night after night, and then we saw the response. But so is the budget for security of this country. I mean, look at how much money we spend on this, preparing for the next war. What about preparing for peaceful time? Where is the budget for that? Please enter into a dialogue here. If I don't see you, please, that's because I have one screen and I don't see the hands, but
Maybe the
yeah.
budget. Maybe,
What?
maybe the budget for all of that is inside of each of us and the way we treat each other and the care with which we present information to each other, ensuring that each of us are heard, each needs are met. And I think we have to find a way to do that differently than we have been doing it. That's where the budget is, in our humanity.
Beautiful. I'm really looking eagerly to hear the speech of the president-elect. And then, of course, we need to all watch the follow-up. Okay, I'll continue. Yes, there is only so much government can do, so much we can do, but after all the reasons and realizations, one thing is certain. Such a sin, whether in ancient Rome or modern Omaha, should give us, Jews and non-Jews, an uneasy conscience. How we respond to the least glamorous ultimately tests the seriousness with which we take the principle of kvod habriot, the dignity of all God's creatures. Kavod is dignity, briot is creatures. So when you put it together, kvod habriot, let me just see if you can recite this. Let me hear you guys. Unmute yourself. It'll be a little bit of Hebrew study here, but that's what teaching Judaism is all about. So please say it. Kvod habriot.
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 Beautiful, beautiful. You guys have two words in Hebrew that actually are at the core of all the teachings about Judaism. You know those two words, you know who you are. I'm going now to the next page. Our search for basic Jewish values takes us from the Torah and the Talmud to the Siddur. Siddur is the Jewish prayer book. Every morning, a praying Jew is invited to recite these words, which are not strictly speaking a prayer. So here are the words. Every morning when we pray, these are acts for which you reap reward in the world and even greater reward in the world to come, which means these are acts especially precious in God's sight. And what are these acts? Here they are: honoring father and mother, doing deeds of loving kindness, studying diligently in the house of learning, or this morning through the Zoom, They forgot to put this in the prayer book. Zoom. They didn't know about Zoom, but that's another way of studying. Visiting the sick, helping the bride to enter the bridal canopy, accompany the dead to their last resting place on earth, sincere prayer, bringing peace between man and his neighbor, or bringing peace between people. And the study of Torah is greater than all the rest because it leads to all the rest. So this is the list that appears in the morning prayer. And now it's going to elaborate. And we're going to talk from examples, from things we have done or things we have seen others do. So the principle again is Kvod HaBriyot, the dignity of God's creatures. Honoring father and mother. By the way, it appears twice in the Torah, in the 5 books of Moses. One time it says honoring father before the mother. The other place is the mother before the father. So someone, maybe a scribe, noticed that maybe there'll be discussion who is more important. And so they wrote it twice. Equal opportunity to honor father and mother. And by the way, the Talmud goes deeper into what is the meaning of honoring. So I remember honoring in my home when I was growing up. There was a chair for the father that came after work, and there was his chair. No one was allowed to sit on the chair when the father was in the house. Also, I remember something else from my Sephardic tradition. My father on Friday night got the head of the fish, always. I mean, it was whatever fish we had, he got the head, which thank God, because those eyes were in the head and they used to look at me and I really got scared from those eyes. But why the head? Because in Sephardic Jewish tradition, the head, he is the head of the family. And so there was this eating of the head. I also added here honoring of children by mother and father. I think it's important to know that there is a commandment of respecting children by the father and the mother too. So the same honor that the parents deserve needs to be given and displayed with the children. This is the commandment of respect, the dignity of each person in the family. The second one is hospitality, bringing guests into your home, especially on the Sabbath and holidays. During the holidays, people without the capacity or opportunities to be with other people feel especially lonely. Bringing people into your home to share your family fellowship is also an affirmation of the dignity of God's creatures. Next one, visiting the sick. Why visiting the sick is so important? And I know that I'm so amazed about and Sharon, remind me, what's the name of that committee at the church of visiting the sick?
Stephen's ministry?
Yes, thank you, Stephen's ministry. So Temple Israel had a caring committee that really did the same. There is still a lot, I think the Stephen's ministry works better in a sense of the importance of every member of the church to be involved in visiting. I'm sure there is a smaller group that is intensely working on this. There are definitely expectations in the Jewish temple for the clergy to visit the sick. So I have a story from my work in Baltimore before I came. I was an assistant rabbi in Baltimore, and I visited the sick in the different hospitals in Baltimore. And after one of those visits, a phone call came to the temple asking the secretary, when is the real rabbi coming to visit me? I was only an associate rabbi. In a later discussion, we discovered that that woman that was there was talking about a rabbi that died 40 years ago. So she was not talking about the sin, but she still had, of course, the image and the memory of the rabbi from 40 years before. But I think we need to do a better job in making people comfortable of visiting the sick, even in a hospital. There are specific teaching from Maimonides that I would love to share with you one day of the times and how to visit a person in a hospital. And we need to accept those visits as still very important visits. So this is the...
I just wanted to say, Rabbi,
Yeah.
the last Stephen ministry class, there were a couple people from Temple that came to it, and they're trying to kind of modify the class to be tri-faith inclusive. It was really wonderful and learned a lot from it.
I think it's an excellent idea to use the experience of the church people to learn how to do it. And we can stop worrying. I mean, I think sometimes we spend too much time objecting to the language. You know what? Screw the language. Let's get comfortable with each other, whatever language we use. It took me some time when I came to becoming a rabbi. And I remember from meetings of clergy where they ended the prayer with Jesus. And I remember the first time or second time being uncomfortable with this. But by the third time, it's okay. If you have a Christian clergy, let the clergy, the Christian clergy or the Muslim clergy end up, or the Jewish clergy end up the meeting or recite a prayer that person feels comfortable with, a prayer that person recited so many times before. It will take some time and all of us will get more comfortable with this. So I know the conversation in the group, but maybe the conversation should be more about how to visit the sick than about the language of the conversation.
So Rabbi, can we quote you? Can we say, screw the words?
Yeah, please don't forget to quote. I wanted to use another 4-letter words, but I suddenly saw the crowd in front of me and I used the word just try to modify this. Yeah, you can.
I want to say too, a little bit of the class when I was there was just the first few, like you said, was a little bit awkward. But what I took out of it was how, you know, the lessons in compassion and listening, in drawing out people. And I just did the same thing, you know, the person who wrote this, their lenses and their background was from actually probably a evangelical Lutheran background that wrote the lessons, but I took out of it what I could. And I think we all need to do that out of all of our lessons. Also, back to your first line of this one, love your neighbor as yourself. I find it wonderful that that's kind of at the heart of all three faiths of tri-faith. You know, that's the golden rule in Christianity. That is at the heart of the Muslim faith. And I think that it's a beautiful thing that it sums up all of the laws.
Can I say one more thing too?
Please.
Along with screwing the words, if you want to, I like to insert my own word. So when I sing Christmas carols, because my family sings them, I like to just put God in there as opposed to Jesus. Insert your own word, because it's all about your image of God.
I do the same thing, Sandy. So I can, Kyle's a music director at a Methodist church. And when I go and hear him, I can sing to Adonai.
It's interesting who is responding to my comment. The Jews in the
All the Jews.
All the Jews. So let me ask you a question. I'm asking the members of the church now. You guys are feeling uncomfortable when a rabbi ends up the prayer with a blessing for God, or when you hear it in Arabic?
No,
Yeah.
not at all.
No.
I think Jews need to swallow that pill and live with this. And it will be one day, it will be more comfortable, but please don't make an issue out of it.
Rabbi, I want to say a little story. When Martin was in the hospital last and very sick, he was at Bergen Mercy. And of course, it's a very Catholic institution, and volunteers come around and offer communion.
Absolutely.
And so this wonderful man came in and was so sweet and kind and concerned about Martin's health and offered him communion. And Martin looked at him and then he just started cracking up and said, no, I really don't want communion, but I would love for you to pray with me.
Beautiful.
And so the man walked over to Martin's bed and felt comfortable then. And then he said a little prayer for Martin and mentioned Jesus in this prayer. And Martin gave me the little side eye. But other than that, we were both happy and thrilled that this man cared. And that's decode it, right? That's what you're saying. That's
Exactly.
what you're saying about screw the words. Decode.
But guess what? Martin is out of the hospital and he's doing better. And so the prayer definitely helped.
I want to be brave for just a second, because I'm in a mixed family and I have a little bit of a challenge going back to what you originated this with about the Romans killed Jesus, not the Jews, but that's not the language in the Bible and in the New Testament. So I struggle a little bit about that, and I wondered how the other members of our community right now who are Christian deal with that when they hear the Jews did it, and could maybe they insert just the Romans? And I don't know what to.
I'll answer, Sandy.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a great question.
Yeah, and I don't find that biblical as much as tradition for political purposes at various times in our history. So the one book that particularly comes across as anti-Jewish was written at a time when there was this great struggle between power factors, as often happens. So, part of it is your attitude towards, my attitude towards scripture. I don't consider that the absolute word of God. It's written by people, some of whom were doing their best and others who had other agendas. So I have to decode that for me to be able to call myself a Christian and not buy into that, which I think is very prevalent in our branch of Christianity.
Mm-hmm.
Sharon.
Yeah, I want to say two things. One, going back to what you were saying before Sandy's comment, how you decode and kind of substitute Adonai for Jesus. Well, as a Christian, and I consider myself a Christian, I don't believe that Jesus is God. And there are a lot of Christians who believe in our congregation, not all, we're mixed. Some believe he is God, and some believe that Jesus is, when I call myself a Christian, I am a following of the teachings of Jesus Christ.
The
And
way.
embody the divine the way I embody the divine. We all do. We're all human. And so just putting that out there, that not all Christians pray to Jesus. And secondly, regarding the comment Sandy was saying about Jews killing Jesus, I was raised Missouri Synod Lutheran, which I was taught the Jews killed Jesus. And my issue with it was, but you talk about the prophecy and that Jesus had to die for our sins, and that it had to happen. So what's your, my thought always was, what's your problem? Weren't they doing you a favor? Wasn't this meant to be? What's your problem? So that was always my attitude toward it.
So I'm going to, I need to respond.
When I say what's your problem, I don't mean to the Jews.
No, I know.
I mean to the Christians who are saying that. I'm like, I don't get it.
Yeah, if it wasn't for the Jews, you guys will not have a God.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I know. Those are conversations. I'm so happy we started with this today, because this is where the tri-faith need to go to. We need to spend more time in talking about those issues, because there's still confusion. And I don't think we are brave enough yet, and I don't know why. Tri-faith for me is the last 14 years. So by now we had to mature already and move into a deeper conversations. So first of all, I want to mention something that I said before, that all scriptures are political scriptures. I mean, our Bible, as the New Testament and as the Quran, is a political document. We need to understand the process of why some things are written there, for what reason. And then I want to make sure to confess here that it is possible that there were some Jews that were not so thrilled about Jesus as a preacher and wanted to keep the line on normative Judaism, and similar to how Orthodox Jews treated Reformed Jews until today. You cannot imagine what is the writings of Orthodox Jews about us liberal Jews. First of all, they don't consider us Jews at all. If you had a chance to read their material, and I'm talking about material written in Hebrew, you'll be very upset as liberal Jews to be completely out of the pale. You're not included. So I think there was definitely a line of Jews that were not comfortable with some of the teachings, and they spread stories about Jesus that maybe were not at all close to the original intent of the New Testament. And that's also true. So there are different truths that one needs to take into account if we also are willing to go deep into the historical movement and what really happened. Anyway, that's enough of speaking about that, but I'm happy about this kind of conversation. I hope all of you are comfortable that we finally got to this conversation. I hope it will happen more often. And we definitely need to do it with Islam.
We are
It's
getting
What?
we are getting braver because we are feeling safer.
Yeah, more comfortable with each other. Yes, please.
Hi, yeah, I would like to say that I was raised mainstream Lutheran, and the first time I heard that Christians thought that Jews killed Christ was when a rabbi said it. So I did not grow up with that concept.
Yeah.
Was this a legitimate rabbi? That was
Yes.
ordination? A rabbi said that we killed Jesus.
That's what he said. You Christians believe
Oh,
that the Jews killed Jesus. And I'm like, I have never heard that. That was not part of what they taught me.
okay, but the rabbi,
So that,
yeah.
we knew that Jesus died, but no one ever said it was you Jews. You did it. No. Or you Christians that did it. I'm sorry, the Jews that killed Jesus.
Yeah.
So
But I'm still happy with the fact that the rabbi was invited to your church to talk about this.
oh no, I was studying Torah with him.
Oh, God.
That's beautiful. Beautiful. Some of you study Torah. Excellent.
So the question I have,
Where was it?
This was up in Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. So there must be a Reform rabbi that came to speak to you.
Yeah.
Well, do you know his name?
This was like 40 some years ago.
Yeah. All rabbis know each other, even from 40 years ago.
I'll figure it out.
Yes. Sandy, you wanted to say something?
just really quickly, and I don't think maybe it's not part of this able to go on, but my concern, because my concern is the words in the Bible, just like in the Torah, it's the words, and somewhere, I got an echo going, I'm sorry. Where, oops, I got it.
Tom Breakout, can you mute yourself? We can't hear the person that's speaking.
Can you try, Sandy, can you try again, please?
Yes, thank you. First of all, thank you everybody for sharing your insights and your references for me. It's just the clarification about in the parts of the Bible, just like in the Torah, where it mentions the word Jews did this, how that affects you when you were reading your Bible stories. I mean, my husband's family they're United Church of Christ, so they're just like countryside and a little church. But it's always, isn't it, when the Jews, there are words that in the Bible that are repeated in church services. Do you hear those words where the Jew did this, the Jews did that?
Absolutely. Yeah, but it's rarely, see, for us in our congregation, that scripture is rarely read, and if it is given the context of, hey, here's the editorializing that was being done by the author.
Okay, so it wasn't so clear. Maybe some noise in the background. We'll try to solve it.
Tom Breakill, could you mute yourself, please, because we're getting a little bit of feedback.
Okay, please, yeah, please mute yourself. Okay. So now we are, after visiting the sick, which is clear, helping a bride to enter the bridal canopy. This meant see that no person is denied the dignity of worthy marriage because her parents cannot afford the dowry. So there are beautiful community wedding rings coming from Jewish communities in the past, where there was one ring that was shared by all brides for that wedding. So even if people cannot afford having a ring, there was a community ring that people use, again, because of the dignity of God's creatures. Accompany the dead. So there was a time in Omaha, and I learned this from the elders of Temple Israel, where when someone died, all the businesses were then closed and people all went to the funeral. They all knew each other and their dignity. Actually, when I buried Mrs. B, one of her requests was to go next to the furniture mart, to have the limo drive through there. And we did it. And all the workers, there was a big funeral, and a lot of the workers, they closed the business and they were at the funeral site. So that tradition, of course, is now disappearing, but still accompany the dead. We have sometimes people that don't have anyone in their family. So we definitely created a committee at Temple Israel where we mobilize people from the congregation to be at the graveside, because you cannot have just the funeral director and the rabbi there alone. You should always have at least 10 people, 10 men and women saying goodbye to the deceased. Next one is making peace between a person and his neighbor. Peacemaking honors God's intention in this world. Quarreling, violence, grudge bearing, all tarnish the image of God within us. To help make shalom, to make peace, is a mitzvah, is a commandment of the higher order. I'm now at the last page, and I'm very careful watching the time too. What motivates us to uphold the dignity of God's creatures? So what motivates us? What motivates us to visit the sick, to seek shelter for the homeless, to share the joy of holiday beyond our own household, to be concerned with persons on the margin of our comfortable lives, to engage in acts of love and kindness? Our Torah, our heritage, teaches us so to live. That heritage is passed through parents and teachers from generation to generation. Now we will all not be serious, bookish students of Torah, and that's not required. But we must know and cherish that heritage and want to pass it on to our children. That's a basic Jewish value. You shall teach them diligently to your children. The statement that Torah study is greater than all because it leads to them all means only if it leads to the rest. Judaism respects brain power. We know that we talk about it often. Judaism celebrates the life of the mind, but let us not misunderstand the Jewish value system. Being a student, being an intellectual is not an adequate value only if our learning leads us to know the good and strive to do the good. Only if Torah study ultimately motivates us to visit the sick and feed the hungry is it a positive value. Brain power and cleverness are no substitute for goodness. On the basis of all the list that I have shared with you, I am now prepared to make my basic list of 3 core values. Are you ready? Those are only mine, but I gave you enough material to select the one that you want to take away from this morning. Number 1, know and cherish our heritage of Torah and pass it on to our children. So I can definitely say Torah and New Testament and Quran, those are the basic values that our religions are giving us. Number 2, Kvod HaBriot, sustain the dignity of all of God's creatures. Number 3, and this is something we have not heard until now, the word tikva. Tikva means hope. Believe in the promise of life. Believe that by being a mensch, being a good person, and by respecting human dignity, we can make a difference for blessing in God's world. This is something we deeply need to have, hope in the dignity of God and in the dignity of human beings that were created in God's image. Thank you. Thank you. Good morning. Now, please open mics and come on, we have a few more minutes. Don't be shy.
Good morning. I'd like to say I was raised in the Congregational Church, and even though we did say, like the Bible says, that the Jews killed Jesus, we really looked at it more like we killed Jesus. You know, all of the people did. It wasn't just the Jews. And of course, looking forward to when he comes again, we want to be aware that we don't want to be against him again. And we did have rabbis speak in our church, and that was, you know, almost 70 years ago.
I'm glad that you mentioned that, because that's the way it was for me in the Presbyterian church. It was that we all killed Jesus.
It's an interesting saga because we're still waiting for the Messiah, we Jews, and we definitely appreciate hope. And I wonder if we will all be happy and thrilled when the Messiah comes. I mean, are there going to be demands from that Messiah for us to behave differently? What would that Messiah say to us? This is another topic that we need to understand each other. I think there is a gap in the way we understand the role of that Messiah. So for us, the Messiah in the image of Elijah the prophet. So we put Elijah the prophet as the announcer, the pronouncer of a messianic time. So we Reformed Jews have a few different observations. We got tired of waiting for the Messiah, and we decided that we need to think about messianic time. So we talk a lot about messianic time, but then our job description in those messianic times is very elaborate. So it's not waiting for one person to redeem the world. It's every one of us has a little bit of the Messiah in them. And maybe that's what the message of the scriptures is all about. But this is a whole different topic that I'll be glad to present one day. But this is another topic that definitely the tri-faith need to be engaged in. A conversation about Messiah, a conversation about messianic time. It can be very exciting and very interesting.
I just wanted to comment, what Sandy was saying about the verses in the Christian Bible about Jews killing Jesus. It brings me back to more than a joke when we talked about verses we wish weren't in the Bible. In our text, be it Judaism, Islam, or Christianity. And also, for Jews to say, or anyone to say, Christians believe that Jews killed Jesus, who Christians are is a broad spectrum. Like, I think we're kind of preaching to the choir here at this tri-faith meeting, that we have people who have more open minds and hearts. But if you have ministers that are heading white supremacist churches and racist churches, then they are going to find little tiny bits in their scriptures to justify their own hatred and their own biases and their own racism and their own inclination towards evil, as RA would say. And it's not just them. I mean, I think the human condition is, there's extremists, there's ISIS, there's the ultra-Orthodox Jews who won't recognize Reform Jews. There's, extremist Christianity who's, wants everything in the world to be, they're kind of like the Christian Hamas. And so I think, I like to believe that most people don't, most Christians wouldn't be such a black and white thinker that says, here, it's right there, this line in the Bible proves it. But it also crosses all faiths, that idea.
Yeah, so hopefully this kind of gathering will infuse a prayer in our heart for us to continue exploring what the image of God means. I think all of those groups that you mentioned need to spend a little bit more time in studying that verse that I like, that all of us are created in God's image, and discover what is the God image. But it will take maybe another thousands of years to finish that. It's a very complicated issue. I try to just give you a little spoon of information about this, but we are responsible, each one of us, to continue the digging, to continue the working, looking deep into our souls and discover that image. Because I don't think we have done enough work on that. Thank you very much for being online. Don't forget, next Monday, 10 o'clock, the lessons are already on the website. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to share my words with you.
Thank you, Rabbi.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Rabbi.
Okay,
Have a wonderful day.
yeah,
And
sure.
let's all watch the changing of the presidents.
It
Bye-bye.
can't come too soon.